Ram McNally miles on my last week with JB Hunt. Ram McNally says 2,390 miles were driven. And my odometer says 2,633.5 miles were driven. That is a difference of 243.5 miles. It really decided to screw me this last week. What can I say, though? It is what it is, right? I decided that for this last week with JB Hunt, I was going to let the planners plan me, and I wasn't going to say a word. I was going to ask them, to pre-assign me something if I didn't have an assignment. But I let them plan me. I didn't complain about live loads. I didn't complain about, I got to get an empty or something like that. Now, you may say that, that doesn't really matter. It's you should be, even if it was your last week, you should still, push for whatever. Here's what I will say. Looking over this last week and comparing it to even last week, which was a week where they were having some issues with getting loads. And I wasn't even paid for all the drops I did last week because I was doing, because they don't do stop pay. They only do drops. Drop pay at a customer. So if you pick up at a rail yard, you drop at a customer, you drop off your loaded, you pick up an empty, and you ingate that empty back to the rail, there's no pay for that empty back to a rail. Only if you take an empty or a loaded to a customer and you leave with another trailer. With exception of if they don't have an empty and you have to go and hunt for one. Then it's on you to find an empty and that's different. But you're not paid for that either unless you've gone to 3 driveways. Now, here's the thing I will say. Last week's pay versus this week's pay. Without all the stop pay I got, I lacked last week. Even then, letting the planners do their thing this week, I made $50 less than I did last week when I was constantly saying, hey, give me something, let's go, and constantly pushing them to give me another assignment. I don't know if that is just because it is what it is, or if that is because I pushed. I normally push, and I would try to always get them to give me a load. Oh, give me something longer. Hey, you got something out of this yard, as opposed to me maybe taking something to Fairburn and then going to Austell for a load. I would always specifically say, hey, do you have anything coming out of this yard that's already on wheels? This week, I didn't do that. So there were some things that happened that delayed me and cost me a little bit of money. Last week was a lighter week. As I mentioned before, they were having problems with loads last week. They were having problems with, they didn't have a whole lot of loads. So I was lucky to get what I got. Even then, even with all the ingating empties back to Fairburn and not getting that second, trading my empty for another, loaded trailer and getting that $37 drop fee, excuse me. Even though I wasn't getting that pretty much routinely last week, I still made $50 more last week than this week. Let's get into this. On my Monday, I was pre-assigned a short load, first of all, to First Quality in Macon from Atlanta. So I went to Atlanta, picked up in the Atlanta Rail Yard, lot 12, which I prefer to go there as opposed to the actual yard itself because you don't have to go all the way back and around and go through the in-gate process. You basically just go in, grab your trailer, go up to the guy there. He comes out and he just scans your bobtail. Then he scans your out gate, checks the seal, and you are on the go. So I really appreciate that. Anyway, kind of weird be given an assignment only to Macon on my Monday though. But hey, I did, and after that, I was not assigned anything. Now, here's what I will say about that particular stop. I was not looking forward to this particular stop because it was a short one and it was because it was a live load. But I got there. they checked me in, and this is one of those things where the appointment time was 3 a.m. and I showed up early. And they actually told me when I asked the office if it was a drop or if it was a live load, because it had an appointment time of 3, they said it should be a drop. I said, okay. So I requested a second load to bring me back so I wouldn't be without a load while the planners came in. Planners came in at like 6:30 a.m. And I was being sent a load to Frito-Lay in Kathleen, Georgia, and then taking that to Austell, anticipating that I would be ready for another load by 4 a.m. By the time I'd get back to Austell, I was basically hearing crickets. They didn't assign me anything. However, and I wonder if that's because they knew something I didn't, because I expected to get there to Frito-Lay by about 1 a.m. And then I was like, give me another load. That way I would have something for when the planners weren't coming in until 3:30. And then I would be able to get back in to Austell around 4 a.m. and have hopefully another load by then. If not, I would call my guy in the office that refers to me as the guy that hit the deer destroyer. And at that point, I would hopefully convince him or the other guy in the office that's usually pretty accommodating. If I ask him to, they'll give me something if the planners aren't coming in for a couple hours. However, when I got to first quality, he said, I don't have an empty for you. But if you go ahead and pull in dock 5, we'll go ahead and live unload you. I'm like, okay, how long is it going to be? He says, oh, it won't take long. It won't take long at all. I'm like, okay. Being that at that particular point in time, I did not have a pre-assignment when I first got there, I was like, okay, I'll go ahead, and if it's not going to take long, I'll go ahead and let him live unload me. Well, guess what ended up happening? I was there a long time. So anyway, considering that the guy in the office wasn't very helpful for giving me loads, I actually didn't have another one for a while into the live load. And then when I finally got one, I actually saw another JB Hunt driver there that was there just before me. He was actually complaining because he's like, do you have an assignment? I'm like, not really. I mean, at that particular point in time, I didn't. He says, yeah, he says, I've been in since an hour before me. He says, and I don't have an assignment here. He says, they're live unload me here, but they told me I could drop it. And I said, yeah, they told me the same thing. He's like, yeah, but they don't have any empties, and I don't want to have to find one. I'm like, yeah, amazing how drivers don't like having to find empties when you're not on the clock, especially when you go to some places and the customers are spread out a little bit. You end up driving around for like an hour before you go to 3 driveways. And if you don't get lucky at those spots, you're going to drive around for a little bit longer. Anyway, he went ahead and got unloaded. I got unloaded. And I tell you, it was 2 hours that I was there. It was right at 2 hours in the dock, not including the time I got there. So I pulled up there. By the time I backed into the dock, start the clock, 2 hours later, just about 2 hours. It was 1 hour and 52 minutes. I was there for over 2 hours, but it was 1 hour, 52 minutes sitting there in dock number 5 before the light went green. And I was like, okay, it must be so nice being paid for all the time that you do all this work. Anyway, so I left there, and within 30 minutes, I had arrived at Frito-Lay. The entrance wasn't labeled, and the GPS took me to the wrong entrance. So I ended up driving through the whole place, which wasn't labeled, coming in the wrong way. But I found a jockey. He said, yeah, you're just going to go back over here, wiggle your way back, and stop there. So I went in there, talked to the person at the gate. They told me to drop the trailer first and then come back to get the paperwork. And then go back and get my container. I don't know why they couldn't just give me the paperwork while I was there. I had to drop the container first, then come back for the paperwork. There was a procedure. I guess they have their reasons. But anyway, I did that, left, got to Austell around 5 a.m. with no pre-assignment, despite calling them on my drive and requesting one after, even though I had requested one before I left First Quality. I requested one when I was leaving Frito-Lay. So I sent messages. I sent a message. I stopped at the gate, and sent a message because there's no one there at night. And so from Austell, I sent a message to the OBC at Austell, dropping this container, looking for a pre-assignment, and then went ahead and did my drop. And then by the time I was done post-tripping, here's what was interesting. I was sent a load, but that particular load, it was a trackside. It was listed as trackside, and on the GPS, sometimes if you go to one of the BNSF locations, you can see on the GPS where the container last was. Where when you click, I'm in lot, and it's when it notifies the app as to where you were. So I went trackside, and I see a whole bunch of containers back to back to back to back to back. I'm like, great. Mine is way back in there. Sure as the world, there was another container, and there was 3 chassis blocking me from being able to pull my container out. And to make it even more fun, if you can imagine, my container was like this. And one of the big cranes that extends up and over everything, it was right here. So the wheels were quite literally blocking the first 10 feet back to the last, back to the next 10 or 15 feet. So even if I had gotten a jockey to pull all the chassis out and the container out, I still would have had to have somebody pull the crane out of the way. I did call Austell and said, hey, I have a crane blocking my container. And he said, yeah, the crane person's not going to be in for a couple hours. I'm like, so no, I'm not going to wait for this. I called the office and said, hey, I told them the situation. They said, okay, we'll give you another assignment. Gave me another assignment. This one was to Granger in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. Now, it took me a while to find this container because the GPS was showing that it was last also trackside, but a different area of the track, and it wasn't there. The entire track was completely empty. And so I called Austell and said, where is this container? And they said, oh, if it's not there, it'll be somewhere on 6, 5, or 4. Okay. Do you have any idea if it's going to be A, B, C, or D? Because that's like a long, long drive. And they said, no, it'll be there someplace. Probably if it was supposed to be trackside in C, try C and D. So I went back and forth and back. About 20 minutes later, I found the container. It had nothing else blocking it, but it had no bill of lading box. So there was no bill of lading there at all. So I had to print one up. Thank the Lord I have this printer. I still very much advocate for having a printer if you're going to be on an intermodal account, because something's going to happen and your bill of lading is going to blow away. I've been in the office a couple of times, and people and they said, yeah, we can print you a bill of lading. So just anytime that happens, anytime you don't have a bill, just come to the office. I'm like, I have a printer. And they're like, you do? I'm like, yes, I do. He's like, okay, awesome. So it's not a normal thing for you to have a printer, but you don't want to go from there or go from Austell or Atlanta and have to go here, or stop at a truck stop, have to figure out how to use their system and make it print and pay out of pocket for that. It's much better just have your own printer. Turn the thing on and as you turn it on, it's establishing its network connection. And in the meantime, you go into the app and you click email the bill of lading to yourself. You open up the bill of lading in the email, then you turn on Wi-Fi, and your Wi-Fi, as soon as it detects the Wi-Fi on the printer over there, it will connect up. And as long as you're running the printer server, and I'm talking about HP printers here, as soon as you're running the printer server on your phone, it's going to automatically connect. It's going to automatically, after about 2 minutes or something like that, it's going to say, hey, we've discovered a printer there. and you hit the print button because you're already up looking at the bill of lading because you've opened your email, you've opened up that bill of lading, and then you activated your Wi-Fi. If you do the Wi-Fi first, it's going to detect and say no internet. And it's not going to pull your bill of lading off the internet. Once it's up and it's open on your phone, then you connect up the Wi-Fi, then it connects up to the printer. So just remember that. And after a couple minutes, it will say, hey, we noticed the printer is here, and you click the print button and it prints up. So awesome. Anyway, I left and I arrived to the Granger just after 9 a.m. Drop it hook went smoothly, and I was pre-assigned first tissue in Anderson. I like that location. So I drove down south after leaving Fountain Inn, which was off of 385 if memory serves. No, 77? I don't remember. I think it was 385, now that I think about it. Anyway, went back down, thought about stopping at the rest area there in Anderson, but decided I was going to instead go to the Quick Trip. I've never stopped at that Quick Trip before. And it's funny because when I got there, there's somebody I have to buy a gift card for. I was going to buy him, well, don't have to, but she drives, and so I was going to get her a $50 gift card for her birthday. And from Quick Trip, but I pulled up to Quick Trip. I'm like, what am I supposed to be getting here? What am I supposed to be doing here? And forgot the entire 10 hours that I was shut down there. And I couldn't remember. I was like, why am I here at the Quick Trip? I'm here at the Quick Trip for something. And as soon as I left the next day, on my Tuesday, to go to First Tissue, sure as the world, I remembered. And I was like, crap. Well, my day started now. I'm not going to turn around and go back. Anyway, that was the Quick Trip off of exits 21 on I-85. Some of those Quick Trips they have truck parking, and I really, really appreciate that. Now, here's what I will note about this particular week. And I got really annoyed by this. There was a conference call we had, I think it was last week or the week before, and they told us they had changed some of the algorithms or something like that on the Lynx LYNX camera, which faces the driver and it faces the road. They love this in the office. They love that camera because they can always look at the driver to see what's going on, and it helps them piece things together. And I'll tell you, whatever they did to tweak it, it got a lot more sensitive. And it's annoyingly sensitive. If you are, there are some, when you get to rail yards and you bounce over, and you can take it slow, and if the truck bounces, it would not normally do the little Knight Rider red light back and forth recording the video, but it started doing that about half the time this week. It also, if I'm driving down the road in cruise control, it's gonna bring me up to like 3 seconds behind the car in front of me, and as soon as I am cut off, as soon as someone comes in front of me to go straight on over or whatever, as soon as that happens, red light back and forth. I'm like, great, you're recording a video because some idiot decides to pull out in front of me, and I'm following cruise control, going 3 seconds behind. And I don't even need to be like, I don't live there. I don't just sit there. I usually let the people go way out in front of me. But no, we have cruise control on, and it's supposed to be within 3 seconds for like 2 minutes or something like that, 90 seconds, whatever it is. It's supposed to record a video. Oh no, it'll record videos much quicker. If you drive over railroad tracks, even if it's smooth, it will sometimes detect a bump and it will decide to start recording. And I'm like, why? Also, you're driving down the road, and I think I told you sometimes it would say collision warning, and it like puts up red letters up on the screen over there, and it like, it like freaks out, collision warning, and red, and it's like, it's whatever. It will do this now all the time. There were times that I would go around a little bit of a right turn, and it would detect a cone on the side of the road and freak out, collision warning. And I would guess it's a cone because there would be nothing there. Then all of a sudden, one cone right there, and I'm driving, around a curve, and there it is. There was a couple of times that it just threw up these warnings. And sometimes it was the following too closely. There was a couple of times that it would say speeding twice, and I'm like, I'm not speeding. I always say the words, I'm not speeding. And sometimes if I'm really, really annoyed, I will be like, I will say 65, 65, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 65. Or I would go 55, not speeding, 55, because I get really annoyed by seeing the stupid little camera. Most of the time, if you see the camera and you see it, you just tune it out. You make it seem like the camera caught you and you didn't observe the little red light. Because I tell you, I've gotten so annoyed at that thing, recording videos this week. I mean, I get annoyed at it anytime I see it because it's like, it doesn't record. Like probably 3/4 of the time it records something that's stupid. It's like, it's recording because it seems to think that a yellow recommended speed for taking a turn at 40, even though, it's like 40 the entire exit ramp, even though it could be like a half a mile exit ramp and a half a mile entrance. If you are going over 40 as you're approaching this, even if you're coasting down from 65, it's going to say speeding, and then start recording. I'm like, you're an idiot. Because the only part that's recommended, it's not a speed limit. It is a recommended speed for a turn, and you can very easily coast down to it when it's a long ramp. And then as soon as you make the turn and you have to accelerate up to merge properly in with the traffic, because you're not going to merge if you stay at 40 miles an hour and the speed limit 65, and you try to merge in there, especially, going off of 85 north onto 285, right there. If you don't get up to speed, there is no merge lane. You basically come up over the hill and you're meeting traffic that's coming in from 285, coming down south, and it's merging in there, and it doesn't give you but like 50 feet to merge, and you can't even see until you start to get up over there. You can see the tops of trucks, but some cars are low. The fact that it doesn't want you accelerating up to merge, that is highly annoying to me. And it starts recording, little light going back and forth, Knight Rider like. And I tell you, this week alone, I've gotten so frustrated at that thing, I wanted to flip it out. Knowing it's my last week, I was like so wanting to just give it the finger, because I'm like, you are overly sensitive now. All week it was this way. I never did. I maintained professionalism, but I tell you, I was so wanting to, because I was so annoyed by that stupid thing. Whatever they did to tweak the system, it's recording all the time now. It's recording all these stupid videos for no reason. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not, looking way up there. I'm not looking all over the place or doing whatever. I'm not doing that stuff. But yet, sometimes driving down the road, it would say distraction. I'm like, what distraction? I'm not doing anything. I'm literally driving down the road, and it was like, oh, I can't see your eyes. Distraction. So if it says distraction twice, it's going to start recording a video. There's one place that if you're going up 75 and then you're turning onto 285, you have to go all the way up, and it's a 720. You have to you enter, and then it slows down to like 25 miles an hour, and then it loops all the way around. Well, if you put your seat in the upward position, which is what the company recommends, what I always like to do, the camera and this bump in the middle of the windshield is right in front, because you're slightly going uphill, right in where you need to be looking. So what I would do is I'd crouch my head down like this, and doing that, it would say distraction. 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 I know it's recording a video, but I'm literally looking at the road. So there's someone that are getting these videos and saying, distraction, he's looking at the road. Okay, well, that one's clear. Distraction, he was looking at the road. Cleared. I hate this system. This system is so annoying because ever since the beginning, when I had a talking to, and they told me, what is and what isn't acceptable or whatever, there's not been another issue. So it's like the fact that it's calling out constantly distraction or speeding or something like that. I'm not doing those things. I'm following the speed limit. I'm not, and so I'm getting really annoyed. But luckily, you know what? I'm done. I'm sitting here in the truck for the last time. I've already taken down almost all the stuff out of the truck. I was out earlier tonight, and I came back in. And that's basically the end of it. I actually I record my drives starting about 2 months into Schneider. I really wish I would have started at the very beginning. But starting about 2 months into Schneider, I started recording all my drives. Except when I was at Martin. Because you're out and back every single day, and it's all overnight, and all it was Walmart's at night. There was never anything really during the day that I was doing, because I started like right at sundown, and I would be out, and sometimes I would record it, but for the most part, if I was just driving around doing a noise ordinance run, it was traffic. You're not really seeing anything. If they sent me to the North Georgia mountains or something like that, I might record it. So I do have. And I did a community post about my OTR time-lapse drives YouTube channel where I post all my drives. And they are 1 year delayed, plus a little bit. So today's drive, my last day, will post, or has already posted, depending on whatever, on March 27th, 2026. Because that is today's date. Well, 2025. That is today's date, and it will post 1 year later, and that will be potentially the last drive. I'm not going to be recording my drives at Martin unless I happen to see that I have a really good, run, because I'll be starting at my old time at 5 p.m. again. Anyway, enough of rants. Let me go ahead and finish this. But I tell you, it's highly annoying when you're scanning your mirrors and you're looking around and it says distractions. Like, it's overly sensitive. It's stupid. Anyway. So Tuesday, I got up and out to First Tissue without any issues. Took me 25 minutes. I was out in 25 minutes, rather. It was an easy drop and hook. And I was pre-assigned Walmart in Midway, Tennessee. So that was cool. Got to Fairburn around 12:30 a.m. and dropped off my container in the TTR. Picked up my container in Lot E, so no pickup chassis and then go. I love that. I love just being able to grab my container and get out of there. So happy it wasn't TTR. Made it to the Walmart just before 6:30 a.m. and did my drop. Easy to go. Grabbed an empty and didn't have a pre-assignment yet. Sat in the Walmart yard until I did, which was about half an hour later. Could have been worse. I did ask, but they didn't have anything for me just yet. I was sent to Keurig in Knoxville, Tennessee. I dropped off my empty and was told my container was done being loaded. And they would bring me the paperwork. So I dropped my container where they told me to, which was right next to where I picked up my supposed preloaded container was supposed to be. Because it was supposed to be it was supposed to be ready and loaded by like the afternoon the previous day. But when I got there and looked at this, I was like, why is the light's not green? And I was like, I looked as I was pre-trip in the truck, obviously it's all the way back. I noticed it was still locked into the dock, but the light wasn't red. It was just not on. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm hearing what sounds like people in the back of the container. So I went back in again and said, are they done loading? And she says, yeah, they're done loading. They'll bring you the paperwork when they're done. So I went back out of the truck and I hung out. It took a little bit over an hour before I hear, I don't feel anything else. I hear a loud click, and then I hear I hear another noise. It sounds like the loading dock going up, or the ramp going up, and then I hear a loud click, and when that was happening, I was watching the light, watching the controller, and all of a sudden the light goes green right with that loud click. Like they were loading me. So the lady on the inside didn't know. About 2 minutes later, a guy comes out, asks me to pull forward, and we close up the back of the container. He puts the seal on there, and then he says, I'm good to go. Anyway, I was out shortly thereafter. Now, my goal was to make it to, there's a pilot in Cleveland. I wasn't able to make it all the way there. I was only able to make it to the pilot in Neada, Tennessee. And so I shut down there. Now, I may have been able to push on to Cleveland, but the thing was, as I was approaching Neada, I knew how many miles there was to Cleveland because I'd already put that in the GPS. I knew from writing it down on my whiteboard, I knew where Cleveland and Niata were based on their exit numbers. And I knew that if I wasn't going to be able to make it Cleveland, go ahead and stop at Niata. And Cleveland, if I would have pushed on there and maintained top speed, 65, which it was in traffic time and people were sitting there going 55 miles an hour and a speed limit 65 in the right lane, and then someone would pass them going 56 and then would sit there next to them. These are cars, not trucks. And I was like, you know what? People are idiots this morning. They're not just getting, if they're slow, they're not just staying in the right lane. They're not letting really people passing. I said, if I were to push on there going 65 miles an hour, I'd have 12 minutes left on my clock if I maintained top speed. And because of the live load and because of all the stupid stuff, I had been completely my non-drive clock was gone. My drive clock was my hours remaining. And so I wasn't going to push it. 12 minutes left and it didn't feel right at all. I stopped at Niata and was good to go there. I received a message about, and this is something interesting. I received a message about failure of service and punishments for arriving late if you don't start up early enough to make it to a customer on time. Apparently, there is a problem, and I'm sure it's not just JB Hunt, but it's other drivers as well, that when you shut down, some drivers just want to drive 10 hours a day. I've seen them post online, or maybe 12 hours a day. And then they want to shut down and start up at the same time tomorrow, so they'll be down for 12 to 14 hours. There's one guy that I know that talked to my manager last week, a week ago today. He was telling me that he drove 735 miles in the entire previous week and he only worked 30 hours. It's like, how can you work 30 hours and only do 735 miles when you're Southeast Regional? If you're local, I can imagine maybe. Even then, 30 hours, that's like barely over 2 days for me. To me, that's just ludicrous. Why would you not want to work? Why would you just want to sit in the truck? 30 hours out of 110. Because if you work 14 hours for 5 days and you are off for 10 hours between, Monday, Tuesday, between Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that kind of thing, that's 4 days. So why would you not want to work when you're at work? That's 110 total hours, 70 hours working, and then 40 hours of sleep time between your 5 days. 110 hours. And the guy only wants to work 30 of those. Anyway, failure of services are starting to happen because people are not wanting to get up enough to actually make it to a customer on time. So I understand laying a smackdown. That is absolutely something I agree with. However, since they never have a problem with me making it to a customer on time, I had a feeling they were going to send me out on a couple of loads that were going to be something like that, where I was going to have to get to a customer by a particular time, by a fixed appointment time. I had this feeling. Anyway, they basically put in a multiple verbal warnings, written warnings, and I think if you miss 6 appointments because you didn't get up in time. Now, if you are sent an assignment and you shut down, you start up 10 hours later and you get caught in traffic or something like that, the company is not going to punish you for that. But if you shut down for 13 hours and then you start back up the next day and then you make it there half an hour late, something like that, because you could have started after 10 hours and instead you chose to leave 13 hours later, and that's like made you late because you left 2.5 hours after you're supposed to. I understand the company not liking that. Absolutely. I agree. If I was in management over here, I would lay a smack down to that. As a matter of fact, I lay a smack down on any driver that didn't want to work at least 10 hours a day. To me, the company has, these are all assets, all the trucks. You put a truck, you assign it to somebody, and it is their truck for every single week when they go out and come back in. You need to have that asset being worked. And I can imagine maybe someone working 10 hours a day for 5 days. Okay. But here's the thing also. You have drivers that will also they'll send out emails and say, if you want to work this one of your days off, then we'll pay you $150. Well, me, I'm never going to have that ability because I work 14 hours every single day. This week, I worked 65 and a half hours. So if they were to tell me, you want to come in tomorrow for $150 and do a load, where am I going to get a load? If I pick it up in Fairburn, I can maybe take it to Carrollton to the Southwire and then drop off, or grab Southwire and drop it off at the rail, or something very, very local. But then that's still going to be pushing my hours, because by the time you pre-trip and post-trip and get there, and let's hope it's on wheels, because if it's not, holy crap, you're going to be sitting there wasting your entire clock waiting for a load. Anyway, that would never happen with me. I would not be able to make those appointments. I'd never be able to work a 6-day because I work too many hours during the week. Which is one of those things where I think that if the company wanted to be fair, what they should say is, if you work at least 65 hours a week and you are not eligible to work because you only have 5 total hours remaining, if you were to work that 6th day, I would think that if you were, that they should give you some sort of a bonus, maybe even if it's $50 a week if you work at least 60 hours. That's what I would do if I was in the company. You know, Martin, they give you a certain number of loads in a week. They start to give you bonuses. If you do 9 loads in a week, they give you a $50 bonus. 8 loads in a week, they give you $50. 9 loads in a week, they give you $100. 10 loads in a week, $200. 11 loads in 1 week, $300. Anything over 11, and they just still give you the $300. So I would do something like that with JB Hunt. Incentivize people to actually want to work. If you work at least 60 hours a week, and that's not just sitting there on duty because it's like, oh, well, I'm going to sit there for on duty and do a 4-hour post trip on 2 of my days because I want to make sure that I have the hours. No, that doesn't count. You still have to do your adequate, duration of a post trip. 15 minutes, something like that. Something consistent, at least. Anyway, by Wednesday, I started up and got to Fairburn about 3 hours later because I ended up having to shut down. Now, despite asking for a pre-assignment before I left, nothing was assigned until I arrived and sent a message from the gate. Again, I pulled up at the gate. I sent a message on the OBC, just arriving to Fairburn. Please terminate the load and pre-assign me. I was sent... by the time I dropped off in the TTR, I was sent an assignment to Lowe's in Bessemer, Alabama. I've been there before. It was an easy drop and hook. At the yard, at least, but then that pre-assignment, I tell you, it was listed, it was interesting. I'll just put it that way. Because, it was a drop and hook, which I was able to do very, very quick and easy at Lowe's. That's a well-oiled machine over there. I was pre-assigned to go to GE in Decatur, Alabama, which is a 5 a.m. live load. I got there. Well, I got there to the GE. I was out in less than half an hour at the Lowe's. When I got to the GE, it ended up not being a live load. I was very happy about that. They said, yeah, drop off your container there, go around, get the office, have them tell you the container, they go pick it up, and then you're out of there. I'm like, awesome. Either way, despite the fact that I still got up, I still got over there, did my drop, I still made it for that 5 a.m. appointment time. I made it a little bit early. But that's that was not easy because it was picking up. It was basically the drives 3 hours to the yard, picking up, and then getting over there. You go back in time a little bit. Still, you drive like 3 hours, the drop and hook, and then getting up there, which was like 90 more minutes. It was just not wasting any time, but I got there at like 4:45. So anyway, it wasn't bad. But I still made it by my appointment time. I mean, you could say, what are they going to do, fire you? It's already your last day. Yes, but still, I like to perform. I like to perform to the very, very end. Anyway, got out of GE. It was fine. And I got all the way to the pilot in Temple, Georgia with 1 hour of non-drive time on my clock remaining. My drive clock was almost exhausted, but 1 hour left on my non-drive clock because it was a pretty quick and easy day. It ended up being a 635-mile day. Ray McNally would probably say that was 550. I don't know. Anyway, best of all, never once was I kicked out of yard move today. And I tell you, I was driving 19 miles an hour over the speed limit because not over the speed limit, 19 miles an hour, not exceeding 20, because at 20 it kicks you out, and that exceeds the yard speed limit in Fairburn. But I was going 19 miles an hour. It never kicked me out of yard move. When I was at Lowe's, it never kicked me out of yard move, and I was not exceeding 15. When I got to GE, did not kick me out of yard move. I was like, wow, it's sticking like glue to the yard move today, which is so awesome. I was very, very surprised by that. Anyway, my Thursday started up without a pre-assignment again. This is, again, I'm letting planners do their thing and only reminding them if it's going to be something to keep me moving. Normally I would say, hey, I would love a pre-assignment to wake up to a pre-assignment, something like that. But no, wasn't sending that message because I was letting the planners do their thing. Anyway, I used my OBC to request one right as I was leaving, Temple, and was told I was no longer inbound to a yard. That was the reply I got. And I'm like, what the crap does that mean? So I called up the office and said, I'm confused. What does this message mean? And he said, I don't have any idea. Let me find out who, talk to the person that sent it. Put me on hold, comes back and says, yeah, that was a mistake. Yeah, it was. I have no idea. Anyway, and they'll get you a pre-assignment, don't you worry. I'm like, okay. So I got to Fairburn. I was driving parallel to the railroad tracks because you kind of come in, when you're coming in from the west, you kind of come in on this road and you drive next to the railroad tracks for like 3 miles. As I made that left turn, I noticed there was a train headed that direction. On the railroad tracks, I would have to cross over. And I'm like, oh no. Luckily, it wasn't going very fast. So driving the speed limit, which is 55 miles an hour, I was watching out, seeing the engine. I was cruising up on it. I'm like, okay, good. I passed it. Have like a mile and a half left. I'm like, all I have to do is get far enough ahead where the arm's not going to drop. And luckily, the thing was going slow. I got there in plenty of time. I was probably going 30 miles an hour faster than the train, and it was a mile and a half. So I probably got there when he had almost a mile. He was almost a mile out, probably like at least a half a mile. And so I slowed down. It wasn't rushing. You don't ever rush to try to beat a train, because worst comes to worst, I would have pulled around, gone under the bridge, and come up on the other side, and been on the other side of the railroad tracks. But in this particular case, it wasn't necessary. I just went ahead and went down and crossed over the railroad tracks and went on to Fairburn. Now here's something that was kind of frustrating to me. I dropped my container in the TTR and looked at my pre-assignment. It said container not available, which means what? It's still on a train. It also means that it's not on wheels, so it's not on a chassis, which means they're going to have me pull a chassis, take it over there, and then I'm going to have to enter the queue for a crane. But being that it's container not available, it's still on a train, so I'm going to have to pull up into the TTR spot and then call them and say, hey, I'm in TTR. Where's this container? Or can you give me the container? And if it's not available, if the train hasn't arrived or something like that, then they'll tell me, and then I can call up the office and tell them, reassign me. Anyway, so I went to try to pick up the container. They assigned me in Lot G, which is really interesting because Lot G I've never been there before. It's got a bunch of chassis stacked on top. It's dust. And it's like very disorganized, in my opinion. Maybe it's just because I don't understand, but I went all through that yard and never once saw my container. So I went through F looking for a container, or not a container, a chassis, and found a couple of them, but they had red tags on them. Did not find one, so I pulled up and looked in C lot. Didn't see one there either. So at this point, I'm like, okay, fine. I'm just going to go to the TTR and I'm going to grab one. I went and grabbed one out of the TTR and went to put it in my spot. TTR 224 was my spot. And when I got there, guess what? There was already a chassis there, but it wasn't the chassis I was assigned to grab. It was a different one. So I parked this chassis in 223 right next to it and backed it up and put it in there. And I was like, you know what? Whatever. I disconnected, went over one spot and sat there. And by the time I had picked up my chassis, I had go ahead and said, I'm in my spot at 224. So go ahead and bring me my container. And it says awaiting crane. Even though I wasn't in the spot yet. But my chassis, the one I ended up with, was there. But you can't go into the app and ship CSX. You try to update your chassis, it will kick you out of the queue for one. And you try to update it when the container's not available, it says, your container's not available. We can't update the chassis because your container's not available. You try to update, no, container's not available. You can't update your chassis. So anyway, you have to sit there and let it drop the container onto the chassis. Once it has done that, you can update the chassis, because once it's delivered the container, it's like, oh, what do you know? The container's available now. So you go ahead and say, crane is done, and then you can change your chassis before you outgate. Anyway, how long do you think I was sitting there? 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours I was sitting in the stupid TTR. Anyway, now I will add this also. The chassis that I put next to me, about an hour after I had arrived there, a container was delivered to that one. I was told when I arrived there that I was slot number 6. And they were like, oh yeah, it's on the chassis. We'll have them go ahead and pull the connectors, and it'll be delivered to you soon. I'm like, all right, thank you. You're in 6th in the line. I dropped that chassis over there. And as soon as I saw them put the container on that, I'm like, why would you put... there's no chassis there. I put that there, and my chassis was in place. And I had already at that point clicked the button that said I was in my spot, so it should have delivered to me first. So I called up and said, hey, just curious as to what my position is in the queue now. And she says, I'm on spot number 5. I went from 6 to 5 in an hour. And I was like, but I put a chassis next to this container because I grabbed my chassis. I said I grabbed a chassis to put in my spot, but I already had a chassis in my spot. So I put this next to me and it put that container. She said, oh, it's not about that. That doesn't matter. What matters is the container availability. I'm like, but I was 6th in line. She says, yeah, but now you're 5th. I'm like, anyway, so I had to sit there another 90 minutes. Very frustrated, just sitting there annoyed, waiting for the chassis, watching other chassis. Anyway, whatever. When I called back after 2 hours, at this point she said, actually I was there just over an hour when I called. This is that call. She says, oh, I talked to you before, didn't I? Because this is when I first asked her, what position I am, and she told me 6th. Now she's telling me 5th. She tells me, she says, you're still waiting. I said, yeah. And she gets on the radio, and I hear her making this call. It says, hey, and she calls a couple of guys and says, hey, I need you to pull this container. It's between this and, she says, between this and this, and I guess it's feed or something like that, markers. I need you to pull the container. This driver's been here like been here for over 4 hours. I'm like, well, it's been over an hour, but I'll take it. If that get us to move faster. But last time this happened, they ended up putting it on a chassis, and then a yard jockey had put it in the yard, and I was never informed. And I was never brought my container. I called them up and said, hey, where's my container? And they said, oh, it's in lot E. And I'm like, anyway, I went to pick it up in E4 or whatever it was. This time, though, I was like, well, considering it looks like it's the same thing again, I went ahead and called them and said, I'm going to call them again and find out. This is after the 2-hour mark. And they said, they're just like, okay, well, she had called the radio. She had activated them already. And she said, yeah, we'll be much longer now. 2.5 hours took for that container. I didn't need to call the office again because by the time I was just about to, the container came in. As a matter of fact, I took a picture of the container coming in, and that's the container that's going to be in next week's video, which is going to be what you need to know about Southeast Regional driving for JB Hunt in intermodal. If you weren't familiar, I did one on what you need to know about the Pod Schneider account and Martin Walmart dedicated. I did those videos as well. But next week's episode will be about intermodal Southeast Regional with JB Hunt. Anyway. So this container, I tell you, I think I told you in the past I was going to make it a policy that I was sitting in TTR. I was going to go ahead and print up a bill of lading, just because more often than not, if I'm waiting on a container, it ends up not having a bill of lading. But this time I was sitting here kind of bitter, and I was like, yeah, it's going to be fine. It's going to be there today. Even though it still didn't feel right. It was like, it doesn't feel like it's going to be there, but it's going to be there. It wasn't. So as soon as the container was like, I'm great, even more delays. At this point, I'm like, you know what? My night's shot. I might as well just go ahead and print the thing up. So I printed it up, fairly easy, 4 minutes and I'm out. Anyway, pulling out of Fairburn, I was just about to start to make my right turn when I noticed the light's red and there's a train approaching. I'm like, okay, so I turn left. Train going across the where I would jump over the railroad tracks. Continue on down to where JB Hunt is. There's a train on the right-hand side, but not one crossing in front of me. So at this point, I go ahead and cross over. You're technically not supposed to go down, turn left, and go down past the Infinity Yard because no more than 3 axles are allowed on a vehicle. I had already been delayed for about 3 hours waiting in the stupid TTR for 2.5 hours and being at the rail yard there. And the fact that they had 2 trains coming in at the exact same time, I was frustrated. I had never once seen a police officer down there. As soon as you get to the other side of the Infinity Yard, like 100 yards past that, there's a little dirt road to the left. You go down there about the length of 2 cruise ships, and then you're in a truck route, which is where, S.J. Lauder and Clorox and bunch of those companies are. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm not going to sit here and wait another hour for these stupid trains. So I go ahead and do that, even though I'm not technically supposed to. You always hear me say I like to follow the rules. This time I decided I wasn't going to. I was going to go on by there and risk it. I was just annoyed. Anyway, I admit it. I did it. So anyway, I drove straight to TJ Maxx in Charlotte, which was about a 4.5 hour drive, and that's where my container was, what I was pre-assigned to actually do. And I was out of there in less than 30 minutes. I was pre-assigned Sofidel in Shelby, North Carolina, and I arrived at Sofidel and dropped my empty just fine. 24 minutes into my yard move, it decided it was going to go on duty and then say, "Oh, you're driving." Why did it do fine with me going 8 miles an hour through the yard after I went into yard move? I dropped my container. I went off on my empty. I was doing everything I was supposed to. And then all of a sudden it just decided after 24 minutes, "Oh, you must be driving." I never exceeded 10 miles an hour. So it completely wiped out. I needed to be driving for, 8 hours. And then I drove like 4.5. So in order for me to finish my clock out, because I spent so long in the TTR, my non-drive clock was gone. So my drive clock was becoming the time I spent at TJ Maxx and stuff at Sofidel. So, I needed to waste 30 minutes in order to actually get out of there and to get my full drive clock, my last little bit of time I had over the 8 hours that I had when I left Fairburn. So anyway, I sat there with the container. I was creeping along like 4 miles an hour, got my container, creep back up to the gate, and when I looked at my paperwork, I filled out the paperwork for the loaded call, and I noticed that the serial number on the container back there was different than it was on the paperwork, and they have to match. So, like an idiot, I accidentally hit submit on my loaded call. Got up to the security gate and I said, "Hey, I need y'all to note that the serial number is not the same on the container as it is on the paperwork." And he's like, "Oh, you need to turn around and go back and talk to dispatch." I'm like, okay. My clock at this point from going 4 miles an hour through the yard and everything was at 25 minutes. I just sat there in front of that arm after he told me to do this. I said, okay, give me a moment. I'll turn around and you turn and go back and talk to him. I sat there for 5 minutes until I saw the little brake light was done and the little checkbox next to it. And then I go back in, talk to the office. They look at it and says, it's interesting because I'll reprint the paperwork, but the serial number that we have in our system matches what you're telling us it is. So I'll just reprint it and there you go, sign it and you're good to go. So anyway, I got out of there and shut down the pilot off at exit 160 in I-85. Got up in the morning, yesterday, and started just before sunset. So I was driving down towards Atlanta with the sun going down, which is nice. Had to stop at the first exit after 160 though, because I noticed that despite doing my pre-trip, my lights on, you can look at the marker lights on the front, left and right of the trailer, and they weren't on. So I pull over at exit 154, get out and look, because there's a stop sign at the exit there, and no one's ever getting off there. And I pulled up there and just stopped right at the stop sign, pulled the thing, and went back and looked. And apparently, you know how there's a suspension with a spring that holds up your air and your electrical lines. This week it had been getting more springy. It had been losing its elasticity and dropping down more. So 2 days into this week, those two cords were the three rather, were laying on the catwalk and or the fuel tank. So I threw a loop of a couple of the springs up and over and then reclipped it so that way it was holding off the ground. Apparently, despite being fine when I did my pre-trip and I fueled up before I left, I made a turn, and when I made the turn, the electric line apparently I don't know what happened exactly, but it must have kinked or something, because it was dangling just fine. But for whatever reason, it kinked, pulled, and the lock, as soon as you flip the little thing up and you put the electrical line in there, there's the little 7 pins, but it locks in position with the top, and then you have to lift it up in order to pull the electrical line out. Apparently, the top part snapped off or broke off, or the spring or the little piece of metal going through there was no longer there, and the top fell off. So making the turn, it was enough to pull the spring, the electrical line out. So I went ahead and pushed it back in. You have a zip tie that if you keep with you on. I have it hanging in where you tie off the glad hands. So you take that, you take out the electrical line, you stick the zip tie in there, and then you jam position it, and the zip tie helps hold it in place. And then it made it all the way fine to Fairburn, which was nice. No more issues with the light. I did write that up though, for the chassis, so it wouldn't go back out until it was replaced. Anyway, I was pre-assigned not to take anything out of the yard. I was pre-assigned to pick up at West Rock in Cottonton, Alabama. Okay, not bad for a last run, I guess. I just have to find an empty. I pulled out. I went to CJ Statistics and drove past Duracell. They're never open in the evenings. Even at that time, it wasn't. Even though it was early in the evening, their lights weren't on. CJ Logistics was was like, no empties. Okay, sorry. So I jumped back in the truck and I went on over to my friends at Electrolux. In Electrolux, there was a guy there. He was like, you need an empty? I said, yeah. He gave me an empty. He says, yeah, go grab one. It'll be on the right-hand side. And I saw that they had one of the new containers. We were told that we were getting some new ones. This was a new one. As opposed to a container that starts with a 2 or a 3, this one started with a 0, and it looks brand new. And the inspection date was last month. So I knew it was a new one put into service last month, because that was when it was inspected. So I was like, I'm going to grab this one, because West Rock can be a little bit picky. West Rock is a location that that when you pull up there, they make you open at the back. They climb up some stairs that they make you wheel over there, which no big deal. And then they would normally lock you into the back. They would lock the person in the back, and they would shine their light around and look for or they would look for rest, anything like that. Or if it's during the day, they'll just lock you locked in there, and then they'll circle on the walls in each place to see little spots of light coming through. At night, there is none of that. This was a brand new container. She says, well, we don't have to be closed in the back, locked up in the back anymore, which I like. I'm like, oh yeah. She says, you just keeping the back door open, or you can close it if we request her, but not all the way. You just got to just close it and hold it. Anyway, it was uneventful. I drove all the way to West Rock. Container was in great shape. She was like, oh, this is probably one of the nicest containers I've ever seen. I'm like, oh yeah. I told her I knew where I was going, so I brought you a good one. Anyway, I was in yard move, and I remained in yard move when I got up to the gate to go inside to get my paperwork and come back out. I was in yard move when I left. When I came back, it was on duty. So I look at it, sure as the world to put me into drive. It told me it was still in yard move, but it was no, you're in drive. So at this point, I'm like, all right, I'm going to be creeping around this yard because I figured I would need to have all the time remaining for me to get where I was, or get going. I was like, I'm going to have to drive all the way back to Austell because that's where it was going. Austell, and then I was going to drive back to Palmetto to shut down where I am right now. And I figured 4 hours wouldn't be enough. It was like 3.5 hours. And I was like, yeah, it's not going to be enough. So it was actually, now that I think about it, it was about 4.5 hours. But I went ahead and said, I'm going to just go ahead and get my entire clock. So I just creeped around the yard going 4 miles an hour. Left there. He said, pull into the left at the stop sign at the railroad tracks and go on up and drop it on the top of the hill. Then go back down, cross over behind the guard shack and get your container, and then come back out. Well, it was when I was getting my container doing the pre-trip on that my 30-minute break had expired. Going 4 miles an hour and on duty, which I kept I take that back. It wasn't on duty. Every time I noticed that it was jumping out of yard move, I'd put it back in yard move. And then I would drive again, and then a couple moments later, it's out of yard move, it's in on duty. That's the reason why I was not going to mess with it. So after sticking like glue to yard move a couple of days ago, yesterday it didn't, today it didn't. I have no idea why. I'm wondering if it does have something to do with just not getting a good signal and thinking that you're driving faster and it's just not getting internet and GPS or whatever. I don't know. Whatever. Got out of there knowing full and well that I was going to be dropping in Austell for the last time. At least this iteration. I mean, who knows? In time, I may come back to JB Hunt. As of right now, I can't see it, though. I will say this, though. Driving up north again, I gotta get my bag of combos. I got a bag of combos. Pepperoni pizza. And was eating my bag of combos. And right as I was entering the Georgia state line, or getting off of 185 onto 85, I was about 10 miles north and I started smelling wood smoke. I love the smell of wood smoke. So I rolled down my window, even though ever since I had heard stories from my trainer in training and seen videos of bats and stuff flying into truck windows, I haven't really done more than cracking the window. This time I rolled the window all the way down. That wood smoke smells so nice. But when I stopped at Noonan and off of exit 41 to fill up and top off the tank, it was it. It was like, nope, it's gone. Anyway, dropped at Austell. And although I was in Austell, when I was at Noonan, I double checked my DRT and noticed it was fine. By the time I got to Austell, which was 50 some odd miles, like 52 miles away, something like that, the planner had wiped out and reset my DRT. So at this point, I'm like, you know what? I have like 4 hours and a little bit more. I'm not going to go back out. I'm just going to go ahead and shut down. So I came back here, started to kind of gather up the last bit of my stuff, and I only have about another 10 more minutes to pack it in. My car is literally right there, so I just got to take my my bins and stuff and put it in there, and then go inside and check out with my manager, which is in about 29 minutes. So I will end by saying that I took pictures of the spring in the back. Also, there's some on the underside of the, I don't think I've mentioned this before, but there is one of the belts that looks like it's wearing on the side, but it's you rub it with your fingers. There's no texture change. It looks different. It looks like it's starting to wear, but there's no texture change. There's no spots where it's reduced diameter. There's no, it just feels like if you close your eyes, you'd never be able to tell, but it's discolored. So I wonder if it was a discoloration on the belt when it was put on there, but I've been keeping an eye on it for a while. I've never noticed it be different. So anyway, I wrote an email, took a couple of pictures, told my manager about the spring, and told my manager about that, and said I recommend getting the spring fixed, but I don't know if you want to get the belt fixed as well, because I said that's at your discretion. I didn't write it up for a maintenance request because I didn't know if my manager would want to fix both of them at the same time, even though one of them doesn't appear to be an issue at this time. Either way, I wrote it and sent it to him in an email. But anyway, that's it for this truck, Freightliner Cascadia. Let me tell you real quickly what the future of this channel is going to be. As of the time of this video being released, I have been releasing episodes at least once per week for 2 years, a little over 2 years at this point, as of next week. I think it's over 2 years. If not, it's right at about the 2-year mark. There are a couple of videos I may end up doing in the future talking about complaints I have for the industry, just in case anyone of authority ever ends up seeing it. I don't know why you'd be watching me as opposed to another trucker or something like that, but still, just in case. I might do them, I might not. I don't know. I do know that next week's episode is the last one that I am definitely going to do, and that's going to be Southeast Regional, JB Hunt, Intermodal, what you need to know. After that, I don't know if I'm going to continue this channel. I've been doing it for 2 years. I got into the routine when I was at Martin of really my daily activity there for Martin really didn't matter because all the accounts were basically the same. It's just, it turned into complaints and just minor updates. I don't need to go back to that. So being that I left that Martin account 5.5 months ago with minor updates every now and then, just a funny story or a little bit here or there, wasn't really a whole lot to report. So I'm not going to continue doing a weekly vlog. As far as I'm concerned, 2 years ago, I didn't know if I wanted to be what I wanted to do, what I was going to be most comfortable with. If I should get a CDL, decided I was going to. First episode was even my mindset thinking about going and talking to Reggie over at 160 in Commerce, Georgia, and talking about the process there, and decided to sign up. Went through CDL school, got hired by Schneider, got hired by Martin, got hired by JB Hunt, now rehired by Martin. Been doing this now for about 2 years. A little bit less, actually, as of the time I'm recording this. But as of the time that you're seeing this, I would have been definitely driving for over 2 years. God willing, like nothing happens to me in the next couple of months. But I don't need to continue this channel as far as I'm concerned. It's a gripe session, and you hear the trains. It's kind of fitting, I guess, that my first day with JB Hunt, it was darkness, and I was about to go in for training with JB Hunt and it turned light while I was sitting here. And it's fitting that on my last day it was dark, and now it's light again. And yet, trains. I remember saying in that video, the last few days I had at Martin, I remember saying I'm going to be getting used to that train sound. I haven't. Anytime I hear it, I get frustrated because I know it's going to be delaying me. I do have frustrations with JB Hunt. I have frustrations and part of the frustrations are just me not liking to be delayed, me not liking to have to deal with certain frustrations about not being paid for certain activities. Also, it's not really fitting for me anymore for me to be away from home. I have too many things going on. I can't really be away from home for as long as I am during the week. 110 hours a week minimum is usually what I'm in the truck. And then 168 hours in a week. So that only gives you 58 hours to reverse your sleep schedule back to day, see your kids when they're not at school, which is limited hours, do laundry, say hello to maybe a couple people, might do a little bit of light shopping, grocery shopping or something like that. And it doesn't leave you much time elsewhere to do other things. And I'm done with that. I don't want to be one of those guys that spends their entire life in a truck. It's pretty when you're seeing America, when you're doing OTR. Southeast Regional, it's pretty, but when you're driving at night, you miss a lot of that. It's just driving on the road. This has become a job where I'm basically doing it to get paid, obviously. And that's the reason why I drive at night, because you're making good money driving at night because there's fewer delays. But I'll tell you, it is not making me happy to be away from my house for so long when I have a lot of things I need to do. It's not fitting for me anymore to do OTR, even Southeast Regional, out home weekly. So I have a 5-day on, 2-day off, home daily job waiting for me at Martin. I talked him back into letting me have my old job, but it's going to be a little bit better this time because I caught them at the right time and they were happy to have me back. So they're going to assign me a truck. I doubt it's going to be a day cab. I did see a Martin day cab like 2 weeks ago when I was driving from around Austell. I'm like, a Martin day cab? That's cool. I've never seen one of those before. But who knows? Maybe I'll get lucky and I'll actually get one of those. I doubt it though. So if this is the end, thanks for watching. If this isn't the end, I'll see you in the future. But regardless, thanks for watching.